I have constantly been a flip-flopper between Mac and PC for most of my music production career. And recently I flipped again to Mac. I am now running everything off of a Mac Mini 2025 model. And I've had some people ask why I made the swap over again. So I figured I would make this video, but also as I walk through my experiences and my reason for eventually switching back to Mac, I figured this would be a great opportunity to talk about what you should be looking for in a music production computer setup and why it's really hard to recommend specific solutions for people without knowing their situation. So my history with music production started on PC. I got my dad's old ThinkPad, I forget what it was called, but it was just his old work laptop that he wasn't using anymore. And I just kind of always worked on some hand-me-down computer for a long time. The stats were so terrible, they're probably not even worth looking up to mention. But I was running Reason Essentials, and that was enough to get the fans going pretty heavy. So I think that's a good barometer for like how underpowered they were, until eventually I got this guy. This is a 2017 MacBook Pro. I'm just gonna look up the details for the specs because even I don't remember anymore. Okay, so this was still Intel MacBook era, so this was an i7. I believe this had the boost up to 3.8 gigahertz, 16 gigabytes of RAM. It had like the weird touch strip thing that like nobody ever used. I don't even think they make it with that anymore. And 250 gigabytes of storage, which is the worst decision I ever made. I'll get to why in a second, but it's not hard to figure out. But yeah, I used this guy as a daily driver for years. Most of my early producing in college was on this, and honestly, most of these keys don't even work anymore. I think whenever I worked on this computer, or if I ever have to open it up to get something, I literally have to get out like my Magic Trackpad and another Apple keyboard because the one on this one is so broken that I like can't navigate anything in it. And I worked on it for a long time, and there was cool stuff that I liked, but there was also some stuff that was just like not as cool as it could be. Like I remember finally thinking, oh, I have like a MacBook Pro, like all of my favorite producers, but then it was an underpowered MacBook Pro. And while I was working on this, eventually I started working as a freelance music producer, and I decided it might be worthwhile for me to actually invest in making a good computer for myself, because if I'm going to be working on client tasks, I'm going to be pulling up sessions and stuff like that, I need to have some kind of reliability, and this thing was like on the verge of dying by the end of its life. So eventually I built a PC with the help of my friend Galen, and we just maxed out as much as we could, save for a couple of specific details. I'm not going to go through all the details of exactly this PC build, because a thing with PC builds is basically they're kind of locked into like the time frame that you decide to build them in, because what is a good build for 1 year? It's not like you can look back 5 years and be like, oh, that's still a good value per money thing. You just kind of have to check it every year. So I'll go over the main details right now. For the processor, it was an Intel Core i9 11900K. It was an Asus Prime motherboard. We had 32 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM and a Samsung 1 terabyte M.2 SSD. So immediately, once I started using this PC, it was a lot faster than the MacBook. And I've spent a majority of my YouTube career actually working on this PC, and it's done a great job. It's been a heck of a computer, and there are definitely things about it that I liked a heck of a lot more than I liked about the MacBook. But then in this year, 2025, I have swapped back to Mac for an M4 Pro Mac Mini that's fully spec'd out, except I only got 4 terabytes of internal storage, and then I got another 4 terabytes of external storage. And to somebody from the outside looking in, it could seem like, why would you want to do this jumping back and forth? And so I'm just going to outline my reasons for why, as of now, I have swapped back to Mac, and I don't foresee myself swapping back over to PC. And the first thing is just cost to performance. When I made that PC with my friend Galen, it was still kind of true, and this has been what PC people have said about Mac for forever. The PC that you can build for the budget of a Mac, like whatever it is, it can almost always swamp that Mac in terms of performance. And for a long time, that was true. Like Macs that were $3,000 in like 2012. $3,000 would get you a monster of a PC rig, and it would almost always be able to outperform the Mac, especially when it comes to things like audio performance or video editing. But since Apple has swapped over to making their own chips, and we are now on the M4 version of that, I don't think that that's the case anymore. The budget for this Mac Mini that is fully spec'd out, which includes the M4 Pro chip with 14-core CPU, 20-core GPU, 16-core neural engine, 64 gigabytes of unified memory, 4 terabytes of internal storage, came to about $3,500. And I'm sorry, but as somebody who's been on PC, has worked on PCs for a long time, and has worked on a lot of other people's PCs, I'm not convinced that they are hitting the same strides that these new M4 chips are hitting. Like for me, I recently did a video walking through a pretty dense production session. It had unrendered synths, guitar DIs that were still running through their amp sims, dozens of vocal tracks, and I'd actually gotten through the video without realizing I had left the mastering chain on the master bus on the whole time at like not the most ideal settings if you're trying to record a video, and I had left the session on 64 samples and it just didn't have an issue. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember the CPU getting to like maybe 30. And that's what I'm talking about, is we're now at a point where the Apple Silicon chips are just performing really well under big audio loads. And I don't feel like PCs have been able to make as big of strides as Apple has for their chips. The second part is the size. I personally bought the Mac Mini because I don't really care about traveling in terms of I need to have a laptop that I can work on, but it is small. It is about this big. It's almost the size of an Intel NUC, if you remember what those are. They're like small computer PCs that are about this big. And it was so small that for this Nashville trip that I was able to go on, I literally just threw it in my backpack with a portable screen and a mouse and keyboard, and I was ready to go. So that same power that I was talking about in the previous section, it is in a insanely compact form factor. And again, you can make the argument that you can make an equivalent really powerful PC for maybe not exorbitantly cheaper than what the Mac cost, but maybe you would save a bit of money on that. My retort to that is, okay, but can you fit it in a box this big? Like, can you basically get a laptop level of like compactness with that kind of performance for that kind of budget? And I just don't think you can anymore. Again, I am not anti-PC. I'm keeping my PC because I don't know, I've gotten used to my editing workflow on it. But yeah, when I flew to Nashville, I literally was able to take my 3-inch Genelec speakers, an audio interface, and this like really tiny Mac Mini and throw it all in a backpack. And it worked great. It was like not a problem the whole week. And I don't think that you get that much flexibility on the PC side. The third thing that made me go back to Mac is Mac OS. I don't know what to say other than just the creative side of Mac OS is just better. I am not anti-PC, but there are just so many small things that make the creative process easier for the workflow that I have that just are constant walls I'm hitting whenever I'm doing it on a PC. And it's been a big problem since I've switched over to my big PC tower. Little things like having notes that sync seamlessly between your computer and your phone. The ability to record a voice memo and have it immediately be on your local machine and on your phone. The ability to airdrop stuff to people in the room. The ability to share a password to somebody who you're in a session with. The ability to be on your computer and text somebody an audio file. Even technical stuff like working in OBS, which is the software that I use to screen record my videos for, but I also have used for live streaming in the past. Even just the process of like routing audio in OBS is just easier on Mac. And I understand that like people who are into PC, they love the idea that you can see all of the grimy details, that you can see all these little things, that you can open up Task Manager and see exactly what's happening. But what I think people don't realize is it's really not fun to be overwhelmed with all these details when you're like, okay, I just want a bespoke tool to help me create something. I don't want all these details coming at me. I want to just be able to shut all that stuff off, honestly, and just create. I don't want to be forced to think about anything other than the speed of the creative workflow. And there's just so many small add-ons that Apple has made with macOS over time that makes it really seamless to integrate your phone, your computer, other people who have the same phone or the same computer. It just works together so well. The fourth thing that made me swap over is working in the music industry. And this is a very specific thing to people in music. At the end of the day, the music industry runs on Mac. You can have all these conversations about performance ratio and cost benefit analysis of using this part over this part and how you can get an equivalent thing in PC and at the end of the day, the music industry just has this thing where if you are not on Mac, you are kind of the outsider. Which I will note is not that big of a deal if you are just in your room making stuff by yourself. It's similar to the Pro Tools being the industry standard argument. Is yes, it is the industry standard, but if you're working on your own and you're able to bounce out WAV files and send out stems, you can basically use whatever you want. Having said that, if you go into a professional studio, like if you pay a big fat fee to go in a recording studio and you walk in, they are going to be running Macs. It's not even a question. And if they are not running Macs, you're probably going to ask for your money back. I'm not even saying that this is like a healthy thing that the music industry has, but it's just the way that it is right now. And you can be somebody who wants to go against the grain and say, no, I'm going to stick PC because that's what I want to do. It's like, okay, great. There are plenty of people who do that. The beat making world, there's a lot of guys who just make stuff on gaming laptops and that works for them great. But like if you are going to be tracking drums in Nashville, or you're going to be in a songwriting session in a bigger studio in LA, they are going to be on Mac. I think the next thing that made me really decide to move away from PC was just the amount of troubleshooting that I had to do on PC specifically. Like when we get into the world of like building a custom PC, there is a level of like personal IT skills that you need to have. Like you need to have a brain that is capable of figuring out problems using Reddit and WikiHow to try to troubleshoot random issues that you've never experienced. See if there's anybody online who has the same problem, which is just kind of a thing that happens if you're working on a computer. But with the PC, there's just so many more things that I had to troubleshoot. Like even on my 2017 Mac, that was never an issue. I think I literally bought a Focusrite Scarlett, plugged it directly into the laptop, and it just worked. I'm not saying that that's how it always is, but like that was my first experience with a Mac. Meanwhile, on PC, the amount of times where I've had to go to the sound mixer panel on PC, go to advanced settings, and then go to every individual input and make sure that it is set to the same sample rate that I've set in my session. Otherwise, my interface doesn't work. Like that has happened to me so many times. And there's been so many sessions where either something gets unplugged and then I have to replug it back in. And now I'm in this weird troubleshooting spot where like, okay, normally this would be fine and it would just relink and reset the sample rate to this, but you have this other app open that also is looking at the sample rate. And so it has become now the host program for that sample rate. So now you need to turn off everything. Like these dumb troubleshooting questions have just completely overrun my life for the past 5 years. And I'm tired of it and I'm done. And to be fair, most people who are on PC have a higher tolerance for stuff like that, because if you are on a custom built PC, not always, but you are probably more likely to have some kind of like IT skills for yourself, an ability to troubleshoot problems that are going wrong, and just accepting that that's just part of how the world works. But if you're not from that world, doing a custom built PC is just like, it has the potential to be a nightmare. Now, I will say there are some positive things about PC. I got to the point where I had maxed out that 1 terabyte hard drive that I had, and I was literally able to go on Amazon, order a new M.2 drive because my motherboard had more than 2 slots. Turned off the computer, opened up the side panel, put the M.2 in. I think it took literally less than a minute to install. Put the panel back on, turned the computer on, formatted the drive, and within like a couple minutes of me getting the box with the hard drive in it, I was able to have a fully functional 2 terabytes of additional storage added to my computer, which is great and awesome. And to anybody who owns a Mac, that almost seems like magic to be able to swap out internal parts like that. But you then have to take the negatives that come with that infrastructure. One of them being, for me, Windows. For all the hoot and hollering that PC people have made about how unintuitive Mac OS is, Windows has now slowly become this insane, gross thing that it's stealing your data all the time. Using the search bar for anything immediately looks for things on Bing instead of your actual computer. A constant trek of finding out what apps are running in the background automatically and trying to shut them off. Having every fresh Windows install start with almost an hour of trying to make sure you've deleted everything that you don't want, and then also some things you just can't delete. So that is why I am no longer on PC, and I do not foresee myself returning to it for audio production. For gaming stuff, I'm keeping it around. But now let's talk about what would I recommend somebody do if they are looking for a music production computer in 2025. Well, first of all, I would say right now, do you pick PC or Mac? And I would say it depends heavily on your personality and your past experience. Do you have a lot of experience with PCs already? Then I would actually probably recommend looking into PCs or a gaming laptop, just so you're not also learning a new OS on top of some new skill like Ableton or Pro Tools. If you're more Mac friendly, I would say go towards Mac. But again, I would say that both of them are good at creating music. And so it's going to be more of a personal preference thing as opposed to you're locked in this ecosystem and now either you can't make this kind of music or your music isn't going to sound as good. Like, it's going to be a personal preference thing. So I would try to get some personal experience with what does Mac OS feel like? What does Windows feel like? I know some people have tried to use Linux, but honestly, once you go into the audio production world, there's just so much that you need to be able to share with other people that, like, if you're running some weird Linux-based DAW or some weird Linux-based plugin stuff, the second you have to collaborate with anybody else, it just becomes a nightmare. So I wouldn't even recommend looking at it. But yeah, so once you have decided Mac or PC, I would establish a budget, and I would have that budget be pretty dependent on where you're at this point in your career. So if you want to spend $3,000 on a new computer like I did, just keep in mind that, like, this is how I make my living, and I have the mindset of buy once, cry once. So you probably don't need to do exactly what I did. But when it comes to whether a computer is the right computer for you, in terms of music production, which is what I know, I would look at a few things. First of all, your processor. What are you going to be primarily using the computer for? Producing stuff, recording stuff, mixing. Like, what are your primary tasks going to be on this computer? And then I would honestly look up on YouTube and see what are the stress tests for that processor. Or if you're buying a pre-built computer, what are the stress tests for that specific computer? If you look for the M4 Pro Mac Mini, there's a ton of people who have made audio production stress tests that are able to demonstrate, like, this is how far it can go before it just cracks. But I would say first and foremost is the processor, because everything that is going to be done in the computer is going to have to at some point be bottlenecked by the processor. So if you get a really slow processor, the computer's just not going to work well. So I would definitely spend the most money on that. Second after that would probably be RAM. So that's going to be, you don't need an insane amount of RAM. Like, sure, if you just have money to blow, it's nice to buy the Mac Studio and just get the full 120 gigabytes of RAM or whatever it is. But I think for most people, 32 to 64 gigabytes of RAM will cover pretty much any music production need that you have. Honestly, if you have a really beefed up processor, you could go down to 16, but then I would also say when you're going down to 16, you're also kind of bottlenecking what your computer can do. So I would almost rather you go up to 32, just because that's a little bit more future-proofed than 16. Because you might get to the end of the year and then realize you're starting to do stuff where you need more than 16. And then the next thing is storage. I would recommend SSD so that you don't have some kind of mechanical component where if you shake the computer too much, you lose data. I don't even know if any laptop manufacturers are making stuff with hard disks anymore, but in case you do, try to make sure it's an SSD. The main things you want to look for is just like speed. So SSDs are generally going to be faster than hard disk drives, but yeah, you want to make sure you're not picking like a really slow hard drive, or like if you're building a PC, making sure that your transfer speed is going to be fast enough. That's another thing to keep in mind too with external SSDs. So for my new Mac Mini setup, I have 4 terabytes of internal storage, but then I also bought a Samsung T9 external hard drive. And the reason that I bought specifically that hard drive was because it was another 4 terabytes. So I had basically have 8 terabytes of storage, but it's also a 2000 megabytes per second hard drive. So it's really fast. And I know that if I'm going to be putting things like sample libraries or contact libraries on this hard drive, I don't want to buy a really slow hard disk drive where loading up a contact patch is going to take like 10 seconds to load up. When it comes to PCs versus Macs, I would also say if you are building your own PC, say goodbye to Thunderbolt. Like, don't even try to get Thunderbolt working. It is a nightmare. I actually built this entire PC around trying to get Thunderbolt to work on it so that I could use my Apollo interfaces that I already had, and just it was never able to work. I bought a specific Thunderbolt card. I actually picked the motherboard that I was getting specifically because it was compatible with that Thunderbolt card. But what you realize really quickly is, for most people who are not music producers, Thunderbolt is mainly used for its transfer speed or being used as sort of like a monitor, like an HDMI that's like really quick. And so all of the infrastructure on PC that I've found around Thunderbolt is mainly around those two things. And so the audio side just always struggles. So I would just say, if you are buying a pre-built computer and it does not have Thunderbolt on it, or if you are planning on building your own PC, just say goodbye to Thunderbolt, which isn't the end of the world, but just I would say goodbye to it. When it comes to GPUs, I would say only focus on a GPU if you're going to be like making content, which I feel like everybody is today. But again, I feel like the M4 stuff from Apple in the Mac Minis, it's just like anything that you wanted to do. It can also be like, also, we're recording video while we do this, or let's edit in DaVinci Resolve while we do this. I think another question to ask is form factor and whether or not that's important to you. Are you going to be somebody who's traveling out of state to go into writing sessions where you need to bring a production setup? Because if so, you're going to be looking at either a gaming laptop or some other really high-powered PC laptop, a MacBook, or what I did, which is a Mac Mini. But if you know that you're not going to be traveling that much, now you're going to have a lot more options to play with, and you probably won't have to spend as much money because it takes a lot of research and development and like very specific parts to make a computer really, really, really small, like thin to the point where it can be a MacBook. Whereas if they're like, it can be as big as they want, that tends to be a little bit cheaper. But yeah, that is why I am on Mac now. If you guys have any other computer related questions, put it down in the comments. To be clear, I'm not Linus Tech Tips. I don't have an insane extensive knowledge on computers. I'm just somebody who's been kind of forced to learn about them a lot through working in this industry. So take my advice with a grain of salt. But yeah, hopefully this answers some questions for you. If you like this video, hit subscribe, like all that stuff. And yeah, I will see you guys next week.